Hey, Luke here with catsandcarp.com, and I'm going to show you how to catch carp. If you are new to carp fishing, or if you've been carp fishing for a little while, this video will be perfect for you. I'm going to show you some tricks to locating carp. I'm going to show you some cheap and effective carp baits. I'm going to demonstrate a few simple carp rigs, and I'm going to show you entry-level carp fishing gear for a couple different budget ranges. If you haven't tried carp fishing yet, prepare to have your mind blown. Carp can get huge and they fight like champions. People always ask me which I like better, catfishing or carp fishing, and the answer is easy. I love carp fishing the most. So let's talk about how to locate carp. Knowing where to put your rig is probably the hardest thing to teach and the hardest thing to learn, but it's one of the most important things to catching carp. So let me show you some tricks. My first tip to locating carp is to think three-dimensionally. You need to know where the carp are and how deep the carp are. Don't fish on the bottom if the carp are not feeding on the bottom. The time of day is also really important to locating carp. In the wintertime, carp are more active in the early afternoon when it's the warmest. In the summer, carp are more active from sunset to sunrise when it's cooler. Carp can also change their location in the water column throughout the day, feeding on the bottom in the morning when it's cool and then hanging out near the surface in the heat of the day. Sometimes carp will go from feeding on the bottom in the afternoon to slurping insects off the surface at sunset. If you want to find where the carp are, look for carp swimming, jumping, or rolling. It's not hard to spot a 20-pound fish breaking the surface, so take a seat and just watch the water for some time before you set up your gear. A few minutes scouting out locations can make a huge difference. It's also important to understand the seasons. In the fall and spring, carp come into the shallows and start feeding aggressively. The month or two before the spring spawn in June and a month or two before the winter, carp fishing can be amazing. In the spring and sometimes in the fall too, carp gather in large schools in the shallows to spawn. Shallow lagoons 2 to 5 feet deep, reed beds, sloughs, those can be awesome locations. During the actual spawn, you'll see carp jump and thrash about on top of sunken logs and in the weeds. Carp rarely eat while they're actively spawning, but they feed aggressively before and after the spawn. In the heat of the summer, the carp spread out all over the rivers and lakes and tend to gravitate towards slightly deeper water that is about 8 to 12 feet deep. As fall comes and the water temperature drops, the carp will return to the shallows. In warmer climates, some of the carp will spawn again in the fall. In winter, the carp will pack together in deep water or any location that is even slightly warmer. The carp will be lethargic, but as long as there is food available, they will feed actively all winter long. The location of the fish affects the bait and rigs you want to use. If the carp are on the bottom, you want to use a sinking bait and bottom rig. Bread, corn, chickpeas, or boilies are all great bottom baits for carp. For a video about my 15 favorite carp baits, check out this video, and there'll be a link in the description. Boiled feed corn is probably my favorite bottom bait, and it's one of the cheapest. Boiled feed corn costs about 20 cents a pound and works great. For a detailed explanation about how to prepare and use feed corn as a carp bait, check out this video. I'll put a link to this video in the description. When fishing for carp on the bottom, a simple 1 to 3 ounce inline lead, a bead, a swivel, and about 10 inches of leader works great. I use J hooks exclusively, though circle hooks can work too. A number 4 hook works great for carp over 13 pounds. Number 6 hook works good for carp between 8 to 13 pounds, and a number 8 hook for carp under 8 pounds. These are rough approximations. When fishing on the bottom, most carp fishermen use a hair rig. A hair rig is tied using a knotless knot. With hair rigs, you put the bait on a piece of line called a hair instead of piercing the bait on the hook point. Hair rigs are great for catching hook-shy fish. As the carp graze, they pick up the bait with their sensitive lips, and if they feel a hook, they will drop the bait. When you use a hair rig, the carp have a harder time feeling the hook before they suck the bait into their mouth. Hair rigs also position the hook better, so you lose fewer fish. Hair rigs also prevent fish from getting gut hooked, and hair rigs make it harder for small fish like bluegill to steal your bait. The downside to hair rigs is that you need a baiting needle and bait stops to get the bait on the hair. If you'd like to see how to tie a hair rig, check out these videos I did on different versions of the hair rig. I'll also put a link in the description. If you're fishing for carp that don't get fished for often, you can get away with just putting bait on the point of the hook. But if you're fishing in a location where the carp are wary, definitely use a hair rig. If you want to fish for carp that are feeding on the surface, things are much simpler. A piece of bread crust or popcorn on a hook point can be awesome. Use a clear casting bobber to get some distance and cast in front of the carp and watch them slurp up your bait. Surface fishing for carp is an absolute rush, but can also be very challenging because the carp can see your hook and they can see you much more clearly. For a great video about catching carp on the surface with popcorn, check out this video. If you want to fish for carp that are hanging out in the middle of the water column, you can use a zig rig. A zig rig is a floating bait that is anchored to the bottom. You can fish a zig rig near the bottom or on the surface or anywhere in between. You can use a small piece of black foam or a specially designed zig bug. If you can see the carp and they're refusing to bite, try a zig rig. For more information about zig rigs, check out this video about catching carp with zig rigs. Chumming bait is an important part of carp fishing. Chumming is when you throw free bait in the water. Chumming helps attract fish, it helps the carp focus on your hook, and it keeps the school of carp feeding confidently while you catch their friends. Chumming a little bit at a time over a space of a few hours or a few days can turn the carp into crazed bait-eating machines. For a really great video about how to improve your favorite fishing spot with chumming, check out this video where I chummed the same spot every morning for 5 days and turned my fishing spot from ice cold to red hot. Carp fishermen have a lot of great tools for chumming bait. Bait slingshots, PVA stick mixes, pack baits, spoms, spods, and even remote-controlled bait boats can be used to chum bait, but pack baits are one of my favorite methods. Pack baits are carp baits that can be packed into a ball. You can throw these balls of bait into the water by hand, or you can pack the ball of chum around your lead and hook and cast it out into the water. The ball of bait then breaks up and leaves a pile of chum all around your hook. If you live in a state that has banned chumming, read your fishing regulations carefully. Many states that ban chumming define chum as bait that is not attached to a hook. Consequently, pack baits that are packed around your hook will not be classified as chumming in those states because the chum is attached to the hook. For a great video about a super awesome pack bait recipe using Panko breadcrumbs, Jello, and corn, check out this video. I've caught a lot of great fish on this pack bait. Okay, let's talk about carp fishing gear. Carp fishing gear can be very simple and affordable, or it can be very complicated and expensive. Here are 4 rods and reel combos that I use for carp fishing. The first rod and reel combo is the Alpha Big Water rod and reel set. It's $39 and comes spooled with mono. It's a 2-piece, 7-foot medium action rod, and it's strong enough to land carp in the 30-pound range. And this rod throws about 2 ounces of lead comfortably. This rod will let you cast a good 50-60 yards, but the problem is that it's heavy, bulky, and not much fun to play fish on. This reel and rod are also not very good at casting long distances, and the drag seizes up. The reel is also prone to rat's nest, and the cheap gears inside will probably break after fighting a couple big fish. But this rod is affordable. You can buy it at most big fishing stores in the US, and it's a great rod-reel combo to get started with. This is the Chub Outkast Stalker rod. It's a British carp fishing stalker rod and costs about $50 to buy and about another $20 to ship to the US. You can save big money on shipping by buying several rods at once and shipping them together. I'll put a link in the description to where you can buy this rod. This rod is designed for fishing in places where you don't have much room to cast. It casts a little bit further than the Alpha. It's a 1-piece rod, so it's really strong, and it's a 2.75 pound test curve, which means it takes 2.75 pounds to bend the tip 90 degrees. It's a through action, meaning that it bends throughout the length of the rod, and it is very powerful. This rod has handled 30-pound catfish and carp, but it's so light and slim in the hand. This rod is way more fun than the American catfishing rods or bass rods. It's the difference between a sports car and a minivan. The reel I'm using is the Daiwa Regal 3500 Bite and Run reel. It's $35 to $40 on Amazon.com, and I'll put a link in the description. This reel has a dual drag system. The front drag is for fighting the fish, and the rear drag is for when the rod is sitting in the rod holder. The clutch switches between the two drags. You use the light rear drag to keep your rod from flying into the water when a fish hits, and then you immediately switch to the fighting drag when you pick up your rod and flip the switch or turn the handle. I've owned 7 of these reels over the years and landed some big fish on them and have yet to break one. This is the Daiwa Mission X carp rod. It's a 12-foot rod, 2.7 pounds of test curve, and it's a 2-piece rod. This rod costs $140, and I'll put a link in the video description. You can also buy it here in the States, so you don't need to ship it overseas. The length allows you to cast almost 100 yards with this rod, but the slender, light design makes this a super fun rod in the hands. It throws a 2-ounce lead very well, and I've caught hundreds of carp and big catfish on this rod. I've also used this rod surf fishing and have landed fish up to 40 pounds on this. This reel is the Daiwa Opus 5500 Bite and Run reel. It costs about $70. It's bigger and has more metal parts than the Daiwa Regal. The wider spool is better for long distance casting, and the heavier reel balances the 12-foot rod better. Just like the Regal, this Bite and Run reel has a 2-drag system and a clutch. I've owned 2 of these reels for fresh and saltwater fishing, and they've never let me down. Now, just for fun, I want to show you something a little high-end. This is my High Spirit High S200 carbon fiber 12-foot 2-piece carp rod. This rod costs $650 new, and it's the ultimate in long-distance carp fishing. In the right hands, this rod will cast around 200 yards. Very few fishermen, however, have the skill to achieve this rod's maximum distance. But this rod is ridiculously tough, and it will cast just about any size of lead over 4 ounces. I've seen guys cast toaster ovens with this rod. It's insane. This reel is the Shimano Ultegra 1400X. It costs about $350 and is designed for long distance casting. The line lay is super slow and very even, and the spool is wide and deep for minimum friction. If you want to fish for carp at distances between 100 to 150 yards, this is the rod and reel combo for you. As you can see, you can spend as little or as much as you want on carp fishing gear. If you'd like to see a great introduction video to all the many different types of carp gear, check out this video about carp fishing gear. I'll put a link in the description. Well, at any rate, I hope you liked this video. I hope it was helpful and taught you a few things about carp fishing. If you'd like to see dozens of carp fishing tutorial videos, check out my video playlist on how to catch carp. And if you'd like to see all my favorite carp bait videos, check out my other playlist with all my favorite carp bait videos. If you like these videos, don't forget to click subscribe to get new videos every week. Thanks for watching.